This is Chapter 3 in Principles of Marketing, and the focus of this recording will be to examine in quite a bit of detail each of the factors in the external environment that a manager must address in their situation analysis. This is a continuation of the SWOT analysis from Chapter 2, and essentially this material will look at the factors in the external environment. This is very much tied to a company's global business decisions. Trends in the global environment drive a lot of the strategic planning that a company has to do to stay competitive in today's global environment. This figure captures 5 of the 6 factors in the external environment. The 6th factor not shown here refers to the natural resource environment, and it is not covered in your textbook, but we will be covering it as part of our SWOT analysis. What you'll see is that the commonality among the 5 factors listed here is that they all indicate a firm's decisions about its domestic strategies and its global strategies. And in our class, we take these 5 factors as input into the strategic planning process. Remember, this was both step 1 in the marketing planning process, and it was step 2 in the strategic planning process. Let's start with the economic environment. Conceptually, trends in the economic environment refer to the macroeconomic environment, which is captured by whether or not gross domestic product is increasing or decreasing. Other indicators would be gross national product, a country's economic infrastructure in terms of distribution, communications, financial. And what you see here is a comparison of those indicators across 6 countries. Remember that these trends are not inherently good or bad. They pose opportunities and threats that a company needs to consider as it moves forward with strategic planning. Other macroeconomic indicators that you see here relate to poverty levels, inflation rates, unemployment rates. Other macroeconomic indicators might be savings rates, credit card debt, and globally, economic development is captured in terms of westernized countries that are developed, developing countries. Oftentimes these are referred to today as BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China being the largest of these developing countries, and least developed countries are often still based in an agricultural economy. One of the most important ways to capture the disparity in income globally is called the wealth pyramid. As you'll see here, globally, the worldwide population can be divided based on its relative per capita income. At the highest level of the pyramid are the world's most affluent customers. And on a normalized to the US dollar perspective, these would be the percent of the population in the world that essentially owns the majority of the wealth, and you'll see that their annual income is well over $1 million. At the base of the pyramid are the bulk of the world's population, 68.4% of the global population of 7 billion people, that accounts for only 4.2% of the world's wealth and makes less than 10,000 US dollars. And again, that's annualized. Many of these people at the lowest levels scavenge in dumps that we've seen movies about, such as Slumdog Millionaire, that they actually survive on a couple of US dollars a day. From an opportunity and threat perspective, many companies are finally realizing that opportunities exist at the base of the pyramid. And these opportunities exist not only because it creates a way for people to move out of poverty by engaging in economic development, but it also provides opportunities for innovation in terms of ways to meet the needs of these people who normally couldn't afford typical products sold in developed countries. You all recall from your macroeconomics class that all economies go through business cycles, and again, it's not that these are good or bad, it's that these cycles pose opportunities and threats for different types of businesses. The one thing I'd like to emphasize is the economic environment is a macroeconomic environment that affects multiple industries and multiple companies. It is not microeconomics. It does not refer to a company's individual profitability or its individual sales. Those are captured in the internal environment that we covered in Chapter 2. The second factor in the external environment is the competitive environment. Companies engage in competitive intelligence in order to gather and analyze information about other companies in the industry. This can be a very attractive internship or first job for people because all companies need information on competitors, and oftentimes they don't dedicate sufficient resources to it. There's even a trade association called the Society of Competitive Intelligence Professionals, SCIP.org, that has a code of conduct for how these professionals can and cannot gather competitive intelligence. At the extreme, competitive intelligence is referred to as industrial espionage, when people are hired as spies, and this can get us into the world of politics very quickly because different countries have different ethical standards about whether or not industrial espionage is ethical or not. There are 3 levels of competition that must be analyzed. At the most basic level is brand competition. Brand competition is between companies that solve the customer's need through similar products and services. So, for example, we might say that Coca-Cola competes with Pepsi. We might say that Burger King competes with McDonald's at the brand level. And most companies, when they do competitive intelligence scanning, focus on their immediate or direct brand competition. At the second level of competition is product form, sometimes referred to as product class competition. Product class competition is between competitors that provide different ways of solving the customer's underlying need. So, for example, if you're hungry, you can choose to meet that need by going to a fast food restaurant, or you might choose to meet that need by going to a grocery store and picking up food to make your own meal. Product form competition is between indirect competitors that often compete in different industries. At the highest level, competition is competition between very different industries who compete for the consumer's discretionary dollar. Note that I'm not going to define discretionary income because that is not what is meant here. What is meant here is that a consumer's discretionary income could be used, for example, to go to school and get an education, or at the extreme it could be used to take a trip to Europe. And so it could be that the University of Montana competes with your desire to travel at this highest level of competition. Sometimes companies recognize this in the advertising or marketing campaigns that they run. And in fact, they may compete for entertainment, whether you spend money to go to a concert or whether you spend money to go skiing, for example. We will draw a tree diagram in class to capture these different levels of competition. One of the most important implications of this for your SWOT analysis is that managers should not be myopic and only consider their immediate brand competitors, because it could be they will be blindsided by emerging competition in new product classes. I would like you to review on your own these 4 terms that are used to capture the competitive structure of an industry. You should have covered these previously in your economics classes. This is a do on your own slide. The third factor in the external environment is the technological environment. Trends in technology can provide opportunities and threats in 3 particular ways. First of all, technology can provide an infrastructure that when a firm invests in it, it can give them an important source of competitive advantage. One of the most important IT trends today comes from RFID chips, radio frequency ID chips. Walmart is one of the biggest companies that has been investing in RFID tracking of its inventory as a way to drive down costs in order to continue to deliver its everyday value proposition. Other companies that have invested in technology infrastructure that have given them profound competitive advantages are companies like Dell Computing, who invested in manufacturing technology and customization technology in order to drive down the costs of manufacturing and customization. Another way that technology provides opportunities and threats is through the use of technology for marketing purposes. Companies who understand how to use social networking, Pinterest, sponsored links on Facebook, pay-per-click search engine marketing, all can get an edge in the online environment. A third way that technology provides opportunities and threats is through radical transformation of industries. In my high technology class, we're covering a reading that came out in Forbes magazine about 12 technologies that are going to transform or disrupt industries. Disruption essentially occurs when a new technology is jumped on by new companies that makes existing companies obsolete. A very simple example of this is when we came out with MP3 players that made Sony Walkmans and Discmans obsolete. The question is, why didn't Sony come out with the first MP3 player? And companies' inabilities to engage in disruptive innovation because of their fear of cannibalizing their existing product lines provides opportunities for new competitors. The economic term for this is creative destruction. Patents are an important part of a company's protection of its technological innovations. And patents are honored within a particular country's borders. And if a company wants worldwide global patent protection, there is the Patent Cooperation Treaty, sponsored through the World Patenting Organization, the WPO, and companies must apply for patent protection in the countries in which they want to do business. As we know, intellectual property rights are another area that varies globally, with some countries having very different norms about recognizing such ownership. The fourth factor in the external environment is the political and legal environment, sometimes referred to as the regulatory environment. And again, these, as they affect a company's SWOT analysis, refer to changes or trends in the law that give rise to opportunities and threats. Before we give specific examples, let's make sure that all of you recall from your business law class what are the basic purposes of American business law. The purpose of most of the legal framework in the United States as it pertains to business is to make sure that all businesses can engage in fair competition. This is the basis of the Sherman Antitrust Act and the forming of the Federal Trade Commission. Essentially, it's to make sure that the business environment is fair, and it's the basis of antitrust law. A second purpose of American law is to protect consumer welfare. This is to make sure that businesses don't take unfair advantage of consumers, and particularly vulnerable consumers, which are clearly defined by the Federal Trade Commission as those that cannot make good decisions. For example, standards for advertising to children have special attention, as does marketing to the elderly. These are the primary purposes of federal American antitrust laws. There's also a network of local, state, and global laws that affect business as well. Some of the most interesting trends in our local environment pertain to the Public Service Commission and the way that they regulate taxis as utilities. It's been very difficult for the new taxi company, Green Taxi, to make inroads in Missoula because the yellow cab has been given a monopoly for much of the taxi service, particularly for medical patients who need transportation. As I mentioned, the purpose of all federal legislation can be summarized in terms of consumer safety and welfare, or antitrust, and these are just some sample regulations that have provided the underpinning of U.S. federal law. You do not need to memorize any of these laws for my class. We will go over some of them because it is important, just like when you drive a car, that business people are familiar with laws, just as when you drive you have to be familiar with the laws of the road. The intersection between business regulation and human rights is critically important. And we see that continuing today with the issues that happened with the factory safety issues with respect to fire, and the way that these offshore factories are run are leading to new standards regarding apparel manufacturing to protect issues of workers in other countries. This will conclude the first podcast for Chapter 3.